Am I live? Can you guys hear me? Raise your hand if you cannot hear me. Okay. I'll just get it out of the way that I'm not very funny, but I'm going to try. Feel free not to laugh. Okay, so yeah, mobile stuff. I guess after this morning's keynote, I'm not sure if any of my research is actually any good anymore. But I'm going to pretend for one more hour that it is, because we're going to talk about mobile vulnerability testing, and what we can do about it around our mobile security programs. All right, so first we need an idea of what is a mobile device. This should be, pretty straightforward. We've got, this is a mobile device, right? But actually, these days, that's a little bit harder to define what makes a mobile device. For instance, what do you guys think? Is this a mobile device? I'm sure you guys are familiar with this particular device. It's pretty universal. Well, I told my assistant, right, who helps me with my PowerPoints, to turn all of the images blue. I didn't realize that she was going to turn the toilet blue, but I thought it was kind of cute, so it's a blue toilet. But aside from the color, your typical toilet. As it turns out, in some cases, this, in fact, is a mobile device. There is, in fact, a few now Internet of Things toilets. You might wonder, what could you possibly want to do with the toilet through Internet of Things? Well, as it turns out, on top of being a mobile device, we take it one step further. There's actually now a mobile vulnerability for a toilet. So this particular brand of toilet, like I said, there are a few different smart toilet brands now, and this particular one, though, has a hard-coded pin for the Bluetooth. Any of you guys who do embedded development know how hard it is to type in a passcode, simulate it. So you probably just hard-code it in, right? This is security, this is what we do. So we hard-code in a pin like 0000. So anybody who gets the firmware and reverse engineers it, then they can figure out what that is and attach to any toilet within range. So if you happen to be at a public restroom that has a ton of those, you just sit there and hit one after the other. So I will read straight from the security advisory. This was from TrustWave Spider Labs, who found this. So attackers could cause the unit to unexpectedly open/close the lid, activate bidet or air dry functions, causing discomfort or distress to the user. So I don't know about you, but I know we were talking this morning in the keynote about human life factors here, but something tells me that causing discomfort or distress to the user on the toilet is a human life issue, or at least quality of life. All right, so toilet might be a mobile device. What about this guy? The car. Well, if you have a car like mine, no, not a mobile device. But if you have a car that's a bit newer, has all the fancy gimmicks in the entertainment system and such, probably, yes, a mobile device. In fact, in a lot of cases, very similar to this device here. It just lives inside the entertainment system. And, we all know the vulnerability about that one. We already talked about it today, making the car run off the road and possibly kill the Wired reporter. Well, he was fine, but basically a couple of researchers made the brakes not work, so he ended up in a ditch instead during the interview. That was just one of many things they made the car do. Basically, through the entertainment system of the car, which had a mobile modem, again, much like our phones that we have in our pockets right now, they were able to mess with the internals of the car. So there's since been patches for that, at least on the ones we know about. So yes, absolutely, the car is a mobile device. Hopefully you don't have any toilets or cars on your company network. I hope. Maybe your home network, who knows? All right, so I guess my last question before we get out of the philosophy of all this is this a mobile device? So this theoretically should be, because it's a phone and that's what a mobile device is. But actually I would say that this is not a mobile device. This is actually a phone in a museum in Cali, Colombia. The country with the drugs, not like Columbia, Maryland. So this was in a plantation house. So, it just calls from the main house to the servants' quarters. It doesn't really have any connectivity aside from that. So I would consider, by our modern definition, the actual early phone is no longer a mobile device. So any of you philosophy majors, you can write a paper about what is a mobile device. So what I like to say is a mobile device it needs to have multiple connectivity So I guess like the earliest iPads, maybe, they don't count either. But even, your latest iPads that only have Wi-Fi, they have Bluetooth, they have near-field communication. A lot of your devices have mobile modems, be it a car or even potentially a toilet or air conditioning unit. We're seeing a lot of that. They just have mobile modems embedded in them. They're getting on the Wi-Fi. They have some form of near-field communication, either with Bluetooth or NFC itself. So things are able to talk to it and receive signal from it in multiple different ways, which is not very nice for us as security people because we are used to doing things a certain way. All of the traffic goes out through one border point in our networks, right? Well, one border port per place that we're at. And we're used to putting our big fancy next generation firewall there, breaking open the SSL, all of that, and then making everything grand with all our security. But these mobile devices are making that impossible because every endpoint that walks in with somebody that we don't even know about, because let's face it, we probably just put the Wi-Fi password in the break room and everybody gets on. I don't know if you guys do a little bit better about small business security here in Romania, but that's how we do it in the US. We're just like, here's the Wi-Fi password, have fun, and all the employees do whatever they want. So it makes it really hard because we can't see what's going in and out of our network anymore, which is kind of a problem since that's the whole point of our job. So what makes it even better is that mobile devices know how to speak attacks. So with or without the user's consent even, mobile devices that are getting on your networks could be attacking other devices that are on the network using just the traditional network even, the Wi-Fi. If it gets on the Wi-Fi, then it's likely on the same network. You can put all the phones and other mobile devices or other guest devices even that aren't owned by the corporation on a separate VLAN or something like that, but not very many people do that, again, at least in the States. So they're just sitting there with everything else. Anybody here do any penetration testing? Anybody? A few people? Anybody the on-site security team for their organization? Expect to see you guys don't do that here? Okay, a few people. All right, so both of you guys who work in those fields know this, that we spend a lot of our time and budget working on things that are internet-facing, and for a good reason. People from China, people from the US in some cases, people from any country in the world who want to can hack our internet-facing things, and instead of getting thrown in jail, in a lot of countries, they'll pin a medal on you and say, yay, you hacked the enemy. So there's not really anything we can do to get our revenge if someone hacks our internet-facing things. Things that are internal, on the other hand, you have to be somewhat near us or social engineer us or break our Wi-Fi password or something like that, get us to download something nasty. So we spend a lot less time working on our internal network, a lot less budget. I generally work as a penetration tester. That's a lot of what my consulting business does. So we, in fact, do a lot of external and internal pen tests. Internal pen tests, we always get in. It only takes one old box under the floor that somebody forgot about. And, escalate the privileges to domain admin. Hooray, hurrah, it's not even fun anymore. But you think about that it just takes one vulnerable device, and then you're letting all these strange devices that just walked into work one day have direct access to those devices. So it's a lot like, whereas someone like Jason Street, who'll be speaking tomorrow, who physically breaks into places and gets where he shouldn't be, you'll see pretty easy to spot, though he seems to get away with an awful lot. But at least theoretically, the strange person who doesn't belong there, we should be able to spot. Whereas this guy who's a little more hidden may not be able to see him on our network. So that kind of brings us to, why are mobile devices really an issue? Everybody says mobile devices are really not that horrible, because if they were, it would be all over the news that Sony got hacked because of mobile devices instead of social engineering. So mobile devices can't really be that bad. Well, in fact, as we'll see, and as many of you probably know, they have all the same kinds of vulnerabilities as we're used to seeing, which in fact makes them a great target to integrate into our penetration tests, like the title says, because we already know how to test them. We just don't think we do because they look kind of funny and they have all these different attack surfaces we're not used to. But really, it all comes down to the same thing. We know how to read specifications, right? I mean, really the only difference between speaking mobile modem and speaking traditional TCP, IP, Wi-Fi kind of nonsense is the specification of how they speak, how we make a socket from one to the other. Well, we can download the specification and figure that out. So let's see what we might be able to do to our mobile devices. Everybody likes remote code execution, right? I mean, forget the social engineering, the client side, all that. Remote code execution is king. Well, this is 2015. It's the end of 2015. We should be over this remote code execution thing by now. Surely we should have been able to make it so hard, with our address-based layout randomization, our data execution prevention, and all our sandboxing. We should have made it too hard to corrupt memory by now. Unfortunately, it's not over. Just this year, we've actually seen several remote code execution bugs in several processes, but probably the most famous one in the mobile world was something called stage fright. That was actually the name of the library, not the bug. So unlike sandworm and poodle and all that, this was actually not a silly name made up for the bug. It's actually the name of the vulnerable library, so you can blame Android themselves. But anyway, stage fright, remote code execution. All you had to do was send a specially crafted, you have to send a specially crafted packet. In this case, it was a specially crafted text message with multimedia attached, so video, picture, things like that. And you could not only crash the phone, but actually get remote code execution on an Android phone. That came out earlier this year. It has been patched, at least on most devices. Mine has not, because I'm still working on some things with the ROP chains to put it in my own tool. So the easiest way to find someone to attack is find a security researcher, because they don't patch until they're done messing with the bug. Just a thought. Also, things like malicious carrier updates. We can, just in a lab environment, we can get a little cell tower. They'll sell them to you for research purposes. They're not that powerful. They have tiny little antennas, but just for research proof of concept, you can get your little cell tower for about $1,500 US. Get a $20 jammer from China to jam all the frequencies around you. Everybody drops back to 2G. 2G has little to no security. Basically, the security is decided by the access point. So you get to do your traditional IMEI catcher, IMSI catcher, whatever you want to call it. We have fancy names for it. The US government uses it to spy on people. But basically, you trick a phone into thinking that your cell tower is the right one, and then it basically treats it like God and says, whatever that cell tower tells me to do, I will do. So, there are places you can go and buy like ones for spying systems and whatnot that are much more powerful. You got to have a bit more money. But if our adversaries have that kind of money and you don't really have to have any technical know-how at that point, you just go say, here's my money, and they will make you a tower and tell you this is the button you have to push to make it work, and then you do. So our adversaries can certainly do this. And what makes this really scary is not the fact that they can now listen to all of our traffic. I guess that's scary enough. Yes, all of our incoming and outgoing traffic to our mobile devices can be watched. I guess we knew that already, especially around here, right? We've got wall of sheep over there, so yeah, right. But what makes it really scary is that there's something called carrier updates. So like, for instance, when my phone decided it wanted to update the stage fright bug, it was the cell tower that said it and made the phone do it. It's between the manufacturer and the operating system and your carrier. They all get together and make new firmware updates when you get your new versions, and it pushes to you over the air. Gone are the days where you have to plug it into your computer and hook it up to iTunes, and it makes that happen. Now the cell towers say, hey, push that down. So if you have the phone thinking you're the right cell tower, you can in fact push firmware updates to people's phones. If some of you guys have been to any particularly, hostile countries, you may have seen this. As soon as you got off the plane, everything in your device wanted to update. It's just, you might, if you're a researcher for mobile malware, which I guess apparently it's not anything you want to do if you want to speak at a conference, but you may have sent some devices to those places with friends and had them come back. So, we certainly do still have remote code execution bugs in mobile. So it's certainly something we still need to be worrying about and testing for. Like I said, you can get one of these test cell towers yourself for probably not that much of your security budget and see how your organization holds up to this sort of thing. We can test for stage fright. All we need to be able to do is send multimedia text messages. Now, I wonder what we already have that knows how to send multimedia text messages. We don't even have any budget needs here. We can just use the phones we've already got. I like tests like that. I don't like to have to buy a lot of fancy stuff to do my tests. I like to be able to use what I already have. That's, I'm the owner of the company, so it ultimately comes out of my pocket, so less money is better. Okay, so the remote code execution didn't work. Okay, it did, but let's pretend it didn't. Client-side attacks, everybody knows that you can hit Java or you can hit Flash. If you really, really want to win a bug bounty or win the pwn to owns or things like that, you want to do one of the browsers, one of the browser extensions probably. So our mobile devices have browsers and extensions as well, which have a long history of vulnerabilities. So undoubtedly, if you can't do it yourself, if you have the budget to get an O-Day, you got $1 million, you can get all the way from like the browser all the way to root level access on a mobile device, in fact. So you can buy something like this. Your adversaries probably aren't going to spend $1 million on you unless you're a really big company, but as bugs get out into the wild, chances are those will be used against your organization, and likewise, you should be testing them. The same way we are with our traditional devices, and when a Java bug hits or a Flash bug hits or stage fright hits or anything like that, the first thing we do is see which of our devices are vulnerable to that and remediate them as much as possible until there's an official fix, and then apply that fix. We need to be doing the exact same thing here with the mobile devices. What I hear a lot from corporations is the mobile devices aren't ours. Pretty much in most cases, people are doing BYOD, bring your own device, and people who are issuing devices are generally basically turning them into BYOD because they're not really locking them down. They're like, here's an iPhone or here's a BlackBerry, but then the person who has it issued to them can download things, use it for their personal use as well. So it basically becomes BYOD because from the moment you issue it, it's no longer fitting your specs anymore. So in probably, 95% of cases I've seen that weren't governments, you were basically doing BYOD, and people are like, I can't really spy on my employees, I can't hack their phones, potentially steal all this stuff from them. And it's like, well, you spy on their emails and you spy on their Facebook, right? And they're like, well, yeah. And it's like, well, it was the exact same argument when the first companies were trying to spy on emails and spy on traffic. Now everybody does it. So you can do it, believe me. If it's on the corporate network and they have to sign something that says, I put this on the corporate network, I believe that the corporation can do X, Y, and Z, you can spy on their stuff, you can test them. So there's also mobile apps. I love mobile apps. I have a real addiction to mobile apps, and I'm not even that bad comparatively. But really, there's an app for everything. I know, Apple did their whole, there's an app for that. But no, there really is. A couple months ago, I was at a conference, and the keynote speaker of that conference talked about being diagnosed by a doctor through his mobile device, like the heart monitor and all that. It could check his pulse through his iPhone, and this was covered as part of his insurance, his medical insurance. So, it seems kind of sketchy to me that a doctor can diagnose you without ever having seen you at all. It seems like he might get it wrong, and heaven forbid I make the iPhone say the wrong stuff, but that's another story for another day. But there is indeed an app for everything. In many cases, you may have more than one app for one functionality. Like if you get a PDF, you probably get a list. Which PDF viewer do you want to use today? So they don't make you go to secure coding school to write apps. They make it real easy to write apps. It's like, this is how you make an app. They basically build it for you, no less. So you have your apps, you've built them, you sell them for $1 a piece, you get 1 million downloads, you're a millionaire, you retire, you're done. So apps is a big business. But, as I've found out by making some very insecure apps and some very secure ones. When I made secure apps, no one noticed. When I made insecure ones, everybody laughed at me. So you don't get any medals for making secure apps. And even when you get laughed at, you still get to go speak at security conferences. So there's really no value in adding security whatsoever. So why would app developers do so? So naturally, you're going to have vulnerabilities in the apps. They're going to open things like maps or files. We just saw, Android file format things as vulnerabilities. Certainly you'll see instances of that in your organization. Do you know every app that everyone in your organization has? Of course not. There's no way to know that unless you are, again, not really doing BYOD at all. So, mobile phishing. When I started security, I thought social engineering was something that people who were not smart enough to do real security research talked about at conferences. But then I saw the light because I had my own consulting firm. Someone said, can you do phishing? I'm like, sure, I'm sure I can figure out how to do phishing. How hard is it to send emails and make web pages? I can do this. But it just kept working. It started, I was like, yeah, I'm going to make this look real fancy, and the email is going to look real legit. And as I went through more and more engagements, it kind of became a game I played with myself. It got to the point where I'd send out emails to clients like, this is an engagement to show how many people click on phishing emails. Please don't click. And I would still get about 30%. I was a little confused. So, phishing works. Social engineering works. That's the real reason you don't see mobile devices brought down Sony. You see social engineering did, because social engineering works. So we can totally just, throw out the rest of our security program, because social engineering, unfortunately, is probably never going to stop working. People like to be helpful, so they're going to continue to do things. I've always thought if I could just find the one prince from Nigeria who's like legit and wants to give me that money, it would make up for all the other times I lost all that money. That's not funny either. All right, you guys are a tough crowd. All right, so mobile just puts a new spin on it. So let's say for the sake of argument that all of your users in your organization, they know all about those phishing attack things, and they're going to see an email that has a link in it, and they're going to be like, nope, we're not going to do that. They'll report it to the security team immediately. You will have 0% success in email-based phishing attacks. Well, good for you guys. You're the unicorn, that's for sure. I've never run into you quite yet. But even if they do, what happens when they get a link in a text message? Are they going to click on it then? Well, you might want to try. My suggestion is go back to your organization if you're the security team, or as you're in part of your penetration testing practice. Next time you do your penetration test, see if you can get client buy-in on this. See if we can do phishing through our mobile devices. Text message, near-field communication tags, QR codes. I see QR codes like everywhere around here. Like I went on a tour, right, to go see Dracula's castle, hence the t-shirt. Cool guy, right? Had some good ideas about running a country. Or a security program, depending. Impale all the users who click on phishing links. I don't know, it's worth a shot. Well, there was a QR code like literally on the side of our bus. There was probably one on the side of the castle too, come to think of it. But there's some QR codes around here. And what's great about QR codes, you can make any QR code you want, and it can go anywhere you want it to, and you can put it wherever you feel like, and people will click on it. So I know this conference, I believe, is affiliated with the DEF CON conference, hence DefCamp. I could be completely wrong, but at the main DEF CON conference a couple years ago during the the heyday of QR codes, there was the scavenger hunt like there always is, and on the big DEF CON symbol, it was about as big as this floor up here, it had the big DEF CON symbol, and there was a QR code in the middle of it. And I guess people thought it was part of the scavenger hunt, because time after time people would come up and scan it, and we could sit off here at the edge and watch, and people would just get this look of complete horror on their faces when they saw what came up on their phone, because it was goatsy. And I don't know who put it there, but it horrified people. If you guys obviously don't know what goatsy is, don't go find out. You'll be better for it. But anyway, we can make malicious links. There have been instances of, cyber, either good guys or bad guys, depending on how you look at them, putting like Twitter pictures or things like that as QR codes. People click on them because they're curious and end up at a client-side attack. So basically phishing just lets you do client-side attacks, because with client-side we do have to have user input. So again, it makes it really nice, because how do we send text messages? Well, we just use this. How do we do near-field communication tags? Again, we just use this. How do we make QR codes, though? I don't think this makes QR codes. It scans them, but it doesn't make them. Well, as it turns out, a lot of those programming languages that you're already using have a QR code library that someone wrote at some point. It's all free, so you can just import QR code and make QR codes in just a couple of lines of code. So again, not too much work on your part, which as security people, we have enough to do, so being able to do it easily is good. So again, these are all things we can easily test as part of our security program with very little additional money, or in many cases, no additional money. So, malicious applications. So this is what got me this morning. This is what made me so angry, is that saying that mobile malware and malicious applications is not like a valid security research area. If you think about it, think about like, oops, how many devices there are out there that have, in particular, Android embedded in them. I mean, we're talking about cars and toilets and a gazillion other things that are some port of basically an Android system. So probably if you added up like all the computer devices, thingies in the world, probably you're looking at getting at least pretty close to having the majority of them, or the highest majority of any of them, being Android-based. And think about all the things they hook up to. Like, for instance, if you're talking about hacking a car through the cell tower, but someone's phone talks to that same car stereo or car entertainment system via Bluetooth, that's just as good of an attack vector. Likewise, things with, like the toilet, I mean, that's an Android app. So if you've got mobile devices that are hooking up to enterprise networks, home networks, coffee shop networks, cars, toilets, all sorts of different things, malicious actors on those devices and our ability to detect them or not detect them, or stop what they're doing or not stop what they're doing, as they may be, in my opinion, is probably the most important thing we're doing right now. But, I'm not going to discredit anything that anybody else is doing. So I like to do mobile malware research. Well, more of the, instead of detecting malware, making malware that no one can detect, which you'll find is actually not too particularly hard. Those of you who are in the defense side, please work on detecting mobile malware. We need you. So defense is hard, so I do the attacking side, but we need you guys to help me out. So basically, it's not too particularly hard to make malware in the mobile space, particularly the Android space, because you don't have to know anything like shell coding or really any API calls at all. In particular, what I make my stuff do is take often the corporate app that they already have. I mean, this is just ABC News. But if you have a corporation and they have an application, taking that application and repackaging it, so you basically rip it apart, add your malware of choice, put it back together, make it call the malware on startup, but act normally. You'd have to sign it with particular keys. This is always, our iOS users, iPhone people are always like, I'm secure, I have an iPhone, nothing bad can ever happen to me. What I've actually found in corporations that's really interesting is, it's true that if you have to put something in the Apple store, they're going to do all those checks. They're definitely not catching all the credentials in plain text, so I'm sure they're catching all of the sophisticated malware. Absolutely sure. That was sarcasm, by the way. So I'm sure there is sophisticated malware in the Apple Store. Because surely if you can't catch username and password in plain text, you can definitely catch the best malware. But anyway, all right, so the best way is not to put it in the Apple Store at all. And you'll say, well, who can run it if I don't put it in the Apple Store? Well, the jailbroken people, but we don't allow jailbroken devices in our organization. More on that later. But as it turns out, there's another way to run code on Apple devices. Your organizations, you can get a developer code, basically a developer key, you pay for it, the same way you do as a user, basically, but it's for the organization, and all of the devices in that organization can be made to accept that key. It's what a lot of your enterprise mobility management, mobile device management, whatever we're calling it these days, do with those private app stores that they make for you. So that bypasses all the Apple signing, because if that key for that organization says, yes, this is good, then all the devices that accept that key will accept that as well. Pretty normal stuff there. Well, the thing is, those keys are usually stored on somebody's computer. If you've got an enterprise mobility management, probably stored in there. We typically authenticate to those through the Active Directory. So what do we do in a pen test? First, we get Active Directory domain admin credentials, in which case, game over. Now we hit all the phones. So Just for those iPhone people who think they're beyond this, Android people, it's a bloodbath. So, yeah. So, I mean, think about it. Again, how many devices do you have in your organization? How many applications do they all have? Even if we think the originals of those applications are good, how do we know these are the originals? I mean, sure, we could be doing hashes against them all the time, kind of a tripwire kind of situation, but we're not doing that right now. So basically something that has an additional add-on could be in your organization right now, and short of antivirus finding it, which good luck with that, you have to try really, really hard, which is, kind of unfortunate that the phones are, I guess, just secure enough that it makes antivirus pretty ineffective, which is not antivirus's fault. It's just how it is. So, you actually have to, or there's ways that you can make things pretty easy to get past antivirus. So you are looking at having malicious capability in your organizations. So again, thing that I would suggest you do is make malicious applications yourself, within a secure control environment. You make them not do anything particularly nasty, and see what they can do in your organization. See, one, how well your security controls are at catching them. I mean, make it really, really obvious and be like, look at me, antivirus, and see if it can catch it. And then make them more stealthy as you go. Take different kinds of payloads, see if the users notice, see if the security controls notice. At this point, really, with this, there's just not enough we can do other than try and take the attack surface down as much as possible, because there's probably going to be a malicious application in your organization at some point. So, lots of different ways to get on a device. Users are going to download apps, they're going to click on things, they're going to open files, and remote code execution things you can't really stop anyways. So there are going to be exploited devices. It's just going to happen unless you don't allow devices at all. And if you want to find ways to get around security controls, if any of you guys are not security researchers now but want to be, and you're like security team at your organization, here's what you do. You go talk to all your users about all the ways they're getting around the security controls in your organizations, you steal those ideas from them, and then you write a talk about it. Because seriously, that is how you will get the best ideas. Users who have to use security that is not usable and they hate using it, they will figure out ways to get around it. A friend of mine says, you want to see how smart your users are, take away solitaire and see how fast they get it back. So, they figure out how to install things at the very least, which you'd never know they knew how to do that if you were at the help desk having to do it for them. So, we've got malicious things, we've got users doing all sorts of stuff. What can we do on the mobile devices? I mean, the obvious one everybody knows, it steals the data off the device. The thing about the mobile device is that it knows everything about you. It goes everywhere with you. I mean, I worked on a media story a while back, a few months ago. It was all about people with remote access Trojans on the laptops, turning on the webcam, and spying on people in their bedroom, as one does, getting video of people changing and things like that, and using it to extort them. This is a big problem we have, because everybody's got their laptop in their bedroom, as one does. But think about where your phone goes. Actually, think about where your phone doesn't go, and you'll probably get a list of nothing, because it really goes with you everywhere. So it knows pretty much everything there is to know about you. And most people have their corporate phone and their personal phone as one phone. So they may have, again, enterprise mobility management, data container kinds of things, trying to keep those two separate, but short of them being really two phones at once, which there are some of the, secure platform makers who are trying to do that, literally two CPUs and two sets of memory to make it really two devices. I mean, I imagine going to be pretty big and ugly, but there are people thinking about that. But short of that, you are basically working in the same space, so anything that's on that device, corporate or personal, is potentially in play. Additionally, anything that goes through it but isn't stored, anything that goes in transit, ability to control the device, so make it do things on the user's behalf. I mean, a lot of corporations, including some of the ones that I work for, do two-factor authentication for email, which is awesome. Very good move, doing security. But unfortunately, it either has an app on the phone or sends a text message to the phone giving the two-factor authentication. So if I'm on the phone, I can intercept that sort of thing. So there have been instances of that, like two-factor authentication, phishing, I think was the name of the article or the name of the attack. So, I mean, it's completely in play to undermine security controls that way. Again, things like recording video of the user, recording audio. So your C-level people who hide behind closed doors and talk about mad money, they might be interested in not having that happen to them. Certainly privilege escalation. If we get on a device as an application, we'll only have rights as that application. If we exploit, say, the stage fright, or we exploit mobile Safari, again, we only have privileges of that application. Same as on our traditional devices, like, I guess these guys are hacking up here, though they might be doing ARM stuff too, I don't know. Well, we can get additional privileges. There are escalation of privilege vulnerabilities for all the mobile devices. Your rooting and jailbreaking communities, that's what they work on. Those can be used for evil as well as good. And turn it around, they can be used by you guys for good to see, what we're vulnerable to in our enterprise. We can certainly see what needs to be patched. And my special favorite, mobile pivoting. So kind of brings us back to the beginning. I think we spend a lot of time thinking if we take the amount of corporate data that's on this device and minimize it, that we're doing everything we can around mobile. But again, if they sit on the network and are able to directly speak to other corporate assets, which again, most of the small businesses I see are like that. Some of even the larger enterprises that are doing a lot around security are still doing this, just letting people put their devices on the network and it can see everything else. So vulnerability on the network, which again, we said there's going to be internal vulnerabilities. I see it all the time. It's 2015, MSO 8067 for the win. Default passwords, missing patches, really easy stuff that your scanners should have picked up. At least you've got scanners that do things for your traditional devices. If anybody tried to run a scanner against a mobile device lately, they don't really tell you much. And they really should do better. Maybe that's the point of this talk, I'm not sure. But anyway, the phone that's been infected through multiple myriad ways can attack your MSO 8067, your missing password or default password, things like that. They speak TCP/IP. Get on stackoverflow.com, say, how do you make a network socket? And it'll tell you, and you just copy it into your code, and then you're good. So you can take your exploits that you already have written off exploit database. Unfortunately, your phones don't know like your Pythons and Perls and things like that by default, though you can install things that'll make them learn it. If it's C code, you can just compile it for the compiler that is the phone and run it from there. You can also do tunneling, like SSL tunneling, things like that, and actually tunnel the traffic from your traditional, like probably a VM of Kali, Linux, or something like that, and have it tunnel through the phone and basically use the phone as a proxy, as one does, and attack other devices, get control of them, and then you've got another foothold in the enterprise, which was supposed to be behind the perimeter. Suddenly it wasn't because the exploited mobile device walked into work one day. That always sounds like the beginning of a joke, like a mobile device walks into work one day and then talks to the computer and then bad stuff happens. I don't know. There's a reason I'm not a comedian. And anyways, calls back to its owner in the cloud somewhere, the malicious attacker with the black hat, or the white hat, as the case may be. So there's just one problem with this attack, and that is, well, I guess the laser pointer doesn't actually show up there. The perimeter. So the perimeter, we put a lot of controls around the perimeter. We're doing pretty good on the perimeter. Okay, maybe kind of good, because I can think of like one time ever that my interpreter HTTPS couldn't get out. But, we're doing better in that area. It's harder to get things out. There is, control about, we can't just call things out to port 4444 anymore. We have to try a little bit harder. We are watching our people surf on Facebook. So, that's where our controls are really centered, is at the perimeter, because theoretically, that's where all the traffic should be going in and out. That's how networks work. Even our cloud-based things, in order for our traditional devices to speak to the cloud, they should have to traverse the perimeter. So even though we're moving things into the cloud, we should just put perimeters at each station and everything should be fine. We'll watch the perimeter and we're good. Unfortunately, this mobile thing has completely undermined that, because we can just do this. The same way we got in, we can now go out. What goes in must now come down. Or, that's not right. What goes up must now come down. All right, jet lag for the win, right? All right, so again, we can attack the other device, and this time, instead of crossing the perimeter, we can instead call back to the mobile device. Again, stackoverflow.com. We can easily get the code to do that. If we don't know it, make a socket, have it call back with the payload, usual way, but instead send it out over something like the mobile modem. I mean, the mobile modem is probably the most effective. I mean, I've done some stuff with like near-field communication, but you know, you have to be pretty close to it. Things like near-field communication and Bluetooth, I mean, they can be used to get out of the perimeter. Things like, I mean, you probably heard of the bad BIOS. I mean, that was basically using audio to bypass the perimeter. I mean, whether that was actually true or not, who knows? But again, you have to be in a certain range. With the mobile modem, it makes it really great because as long as it's on a cell tower, it's connected, and our devices are specifically designed to be on a cell tower as much as humanly possible so people won't switch to another carrier. So we basically make them insecure on purpose so we can be connected to the corporate Wi-Fi, but then force it to send out our data via the mobile modem. Again, not the only way to bypass the perimeter, but in terms of like actually doing it effectively, it's probably the best because you don't have to be in a certain range. You could literally be halfway across the world and it'll still work. So I guess you can kind of think of your mobile modems as internet-facing devices, which we all know how well that goes, particularly when we're not doing any security testing on it. So, you know, you again send it back to the attacker, but this time bypass the perimeter entirely. So something I've mentioned a couple of times, but not gone in depth about, is mobile security controls. You know, people always say, but Georgia, I have all of these fancy things that I'm paying all this fancy money for. You know, we're talking about like $10 a user even in some cases, which if you add that up to all the users you've got, gets to be pretty high. Then they buy in for like the actual box. You know, you got your data containers, your enterprise mobility management solutions, your corporate app stores that put wrappers around all the apps, your mobile antivirus. You might be buying like particular hardened platforms that are supposed to be super secure and unhackable. I mean, you name it, this is a big business. And it's such a great business because literally right now, all of us could just go and say, we're the new mobile security company and we provide this list of things. And all we really need to sell them, unfortunately, is a marketing department, because there's really no way to validate whether these things are working or not. The trouble, I think, is that we basically just retrofitted what kind of worked around traditional devices and said, now we have those for mobile. But we didn't really ever check to see what our particular needs were around mobile security. And our organizations are doing the exact same thing. They're like, oh, well, you know, these people have a bunch of clients, so they must be good. They had a big booth at RSA. They must be really great at security, which, you know, that's never ended well for anyone ever. So we need to be doing more around this. I mean, I like to liken it to if we need to do denial of service attack prevention on our corporate websites. Well, what do? We get denial of service attack prevention, probably get a free trial from somebody or a demonstration. We put it in front of our staging boxes because we have one of those because we're a secure operation, so we have staging and production. So we put it in front of staging and we run denial of service attacks against it because there's tools that'll do that for you. I mean, the same sort of stuff Anonymous uses, right? Why not just get the low orbit ion cannon thing and run it and see if it makes it fall down. And if it does, you go buy another one. So we're introducing solutions for problems we actually have and making sure that those solutions actually provide value to us and our particular organization. We need to be able to do that around mobile too, because as it is right now, you basically have a list on the back of the box of things that may or may not be problems for you, because unless you're testing these sorts of things that we've talked about, you don't really know what your mobile security posture risk issues, whatever, are. So you don't really know what you need to be mitigating. So just taking a list on the back of the box that's retrofitted from traditional devices may not be the best idea ever. But even still, just because it says it does something in particular doesn't mean it actually does. Or it may do it, but it may not do it in a very effective way. The example I like to use is, a lot of your enterprise mobility management solutions, data containers, all of that, they always say, we do jailbreaking and rooting detection. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't want rooted or jailbroken devices in my enterprise. Yeah, I could see that. Don't want them running malware or anything. But all the ones I've looked at, what they do is they look for, on the iPhone side, the Cydia app, the third-party app store that gets installed when you use the traditional jailbreaks that you can just download off the internet, the green snow and the red poison and all that, which, it's red snow and green poison, haha, I'm not funny. And then on the Android side, super user SU application. Actually, when I first was starting to look at this stuff, it was an audience member just like you who put up their hand and said, I just changed the super user app to super user 1, and my enterprise mobility management solution didn't see it anymore. So like I said, the best way to come up with these security control bypasses is ask your users. So that's how I got into mobile device management bypasses, is someone in the audience pointed out that they could get around theirs very trivially. So yeah, that's exactly what all the ones I've looked at are doing. They're looking for an instance of a certain application, and in some cases, actually just renaming the application is enough. But if you think about it, all that's going to catch is a user who jailbroke or rooted their phone, which is great. Okay, it's against corporate policy. We can give them a slap on the wrist, and they can't get their email until they fix the issue. But if you're talking about a malicious entity who did, one of these things, if they made a malicious application and then did privilege escalation to get root or jailbreak privileges, or they sent a phishing attack, or they attacked the browser, or they did stage fright and one way or another ended up with root privileges, they probably don't need a third-party app store. They probably know enough command line kung fu to be good without that. So my guess is looking for the Cydia app is only going to catch the very bottom of the barrel on the skill set of your malicious attackers in the enterprise, because they don't need a third-party app store. They got a root shell. They're good. Talk to these guys up here. Once they've got root, they're good, golden. So in that case, you've got a check that, theoretically, it does do what it says, but it's not really providing you any value. And it's only security researchers who are really thinking about this. But you guys, as enterprise security professionals and pen testers, you got to be the ones who do the pushback on this, because I'm just the crazy girl up here talking about the mobile stuff. We need buy-in from corporations saying, now this isn't good enough. We need you to actually provide us this value. Again, one, the value you actually need based on what your risks are around these different kinds of attacks. And two, security controls that actually provide you mitigations. All the data containers, it's like, well, we keep things in separate parts of memory. Again, all you got to do is get root level privileges and you can dump the entire memory image. So again, I've seen some, at least research on having phones with actually two different, basically computers inside of the phone. That would really be the only way to stop that kind of attack. And yet our data containers call themselves secure against privilege escalation attacks. Not so much. Don't let them lie to you anymore. You can do these kinds of tests. You're smart. I know you can do it. All right. So that's it. We need to do these mobile security tests. We need to be testing whether our security controls are working, whether known attacks, they're going to work on our mobile devices. Again, I get a lot of pushback from people who say, we can't run these kinds of attacks against our users. We just can't do that. Whereas it's perfectly okay to do it against their workstations because we own it. We can run MSO 8067, we can run Nessus, we can run Metasploit Pro, we can run whatever we feel like. Mobile devices are apparently a no-no. Please get over it. Please push back. Please make them do it. It's exactly like spying on emails or spying on web traffic. We're all doing it now in one way or another. When people sign on to be on our networks, they are subject to our security policy. Make it part of your security policy. The pushback will happen, but they're going to have to get over it. The idea that we can't read people's emails now is just like absurd. Haha, it's a joke. That'll be the future of mobile, so you may as well be an early adopter, if you will. So, And I think in particular is this kind of attack is that, you're starting to see a couple of startups in the US at least that will at least try and do detection for like rogue access points in your organization to try and stop these sorts of things. But again, until the big players start even thinking about it, no one really notices because it's all about marketing department in this sort of area. So this is really a big issue for everybody, that we're spending a lot of money at the perimeter, and one little device with one little malicious application, again, malicious application, who cares about that, could in fact bypass all of that and be completely undetected. So it might be worth checking out some of those startups. Who knows? Figure out what your risk is around it. If you don't have mobile devices in your enterprise, all your employees hate you, but you don't have any risk around mobile devices. So it really depends on the particular organization, and there's just not enough organizations testing their mobile devices for our enterprise security controls to actually even try and do a good job. So I've got about 10 minutes. I don't know what's happened to me lately. I've started talking way too much. This never used to happen to me. It may be a good time to retire and go do real security research. I don't know. But there's a demo video online of this if you want to see it, basically testing all the different attacks. So as I do, I'll put a Twitter link up later. But I do want to leave you with, before I take questions from you, I have questions for you. Not that you have to answer right now, or not that you even have to answer at all. These are just questions to take back to your security practice, your enterprise, your security group, your penetration testing group. So the slides are with the conference, so they will be up. But so I realize that's a bit hard to read if your vision is about as good as mine, which I imagine it is because you stare at computers all day like I do. But basically, is your EMM, MDM solution set up correctly and providing value? Does it actually do what it says on the box that it will do? Obviously, it doesn't really have a box, but on the website, are your users responding correctly to mobile-based phishing attacks? Again, this isn't something that would be particularly hard to add into your program. You already have the hardware to do it. Everybody in your organization, in fact, has one. So do your users, for instance, install third-party apps if prompted? I actually saw a mobile carrier once ask you to install a third-party app. So, it's more likely than you might think that your users are going to be asked to install malware at some point. Wouldn't it be nice to find out what they would do? I mean, we're doing it around email all the time. We have things like Fish Me or Fishline or these other phishing trainings where if somebody clicks on it, they immediately have to do social engineering training, which nobody likes to take social engineering training. But instead of making everybody take it at the beginning of the quarter or whatever, it's the people who are actually clicking on the links who have to take the training. We can certainly do the same sort of thing around mobile-based phishing, and should be. So do your antivirus solutions actually warn people when they download potentially malicious things? I mean, another thing we could easily test, we take simple malware samples, take the payload out, but it should still match and should still get picked out. If it's not, maybe you should reconsider buying that next quarter. Maybe spend your money somewhere else. Maybe try and find a better one. The only way these solutions are going to get better is pushback from organizations. As long as mobile antivirus is making millions and millions of dollars for them, why would they make it better? So let's see, what else? What would a compromised mobile device be able to access over the network? So, again, if you have your own VLAN that's all mobile devices, all guest devices, and can't see Active Directory, can't see workstations, can't see servers, can't see staging or any of that, then you're a lot better off than most people. Again, it usually kind of just drops into the same place, and any vulnerabilities on that network are now available to the phones, so you can get the idea of what that is. You can make a little app on there and say, what can I see? They have things like Nmap already made for mobile devices. You don't even have to recompile them. So we can see what we can see on our network. And last but not least, and again, these are just examples, would a compromised mobile device in my network be able to compromise and exfiltrate data? So would this kind of attack work? I guess unless you've got very particular devices from very particular startups, the answer to this is absolutely yes. But, again, you got to see what your risk profile is around it, see whether it's something that's, a high risk issue for you. So I guess, that's my point, that we need to be putting mobile devices into our security plan, into our security testing. I started as a member of an on-site security team and then became a pen tester, and now I run startups. So of course I want you to buy stuff that works, like my stuff. But, whatever. So point being, we need to be thinking about the mobile devices. The only way we're going to get strong security postures around mobile devices, standards for mobile device security, devices that are secure, and security controls that actually work is by penetration testers and security teams pushing back on this doesn't work, this is not secure, we've got all these vulnerabilities, get rid of this thing that we're spending all this money on that's providing no value, things like that. So getting rid of mobile devices out of the enterprise is not going to work. It's just going to get worse because the toilet's going to be on the network next year anyways. So we need to do some things around this. So here's my contact information. I'm the first one of my name who comes up on Google. So you can just Google my name and you'll see my LinkedIn, Facebook, all that. So I'd love to hear from you guys. If you have any questions about this, I do have a few minutes, like 5 maybe, to take questions for, I guess there's nobody after me in here. So if anybody has any questions, but if you would rather send them, I have an email address up here. And again, you can just Google me, as it goes. So does anybody have any questions for me? No, I guess you all understood everything perfectly. Well, I'm going to hear from all of you about integrating this into your enterprise. So I look forward to hearing from you.
There is one question.
Oh, there is a question. Good.
So how about customers that use two-factor authentication?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What do you do with the customers that use two-factor authentication?
So what do I do with customers who use two-factor authentication? One, I congratulate them for thinking about security well. I actually, I've seen, basically it all seems to come down to, either the little RSA tokens, which we've seen the problems with those, but it's really moving towards, all text message or having an app on the device. I guess the best thing I've seen around two-factor authentication, it would be probably Duo Security's two-factor. But for getting around the two-factor, what you can do is, you can capture text messages coming in if they're doing a text message two-factor. So you can capture it coming in. If you've got root level privileges, you can set it baseband and then you capture it before the user does. With the applications that they're doing, if you can basically send the command to the application to make it generate the second part for the two-factor, that's also bypassable, but you do have to be on a device already to do that, hence why it does make it better than just one factor. But if you are already on somebody's device, it is bypassable. There was a news story, again I can't remember the name, but if you look up two-factor mobile phishing, there have been instances in the wild of attacks that were able to do both parts of the two-factor using those same kinds of methods. So it is possible and is happening in the wild, so we should be testing it.
May I ask one more question?
Absolutely.
You mentioned stealing signing keys for the applications. How do you steal them?
So stealing signing keys for the applications, well, it all depends on where they're stored. So typically, if they're in the enterprise mobility management systems, which if you have a corporate app store, it's usually part of some system of enterprise security, and it's usually by default for those they do have domain authentication. So typically in my pen test, with something like Responder, I get credentials coming through, hashes. So, ways of getting domain admin or privileged domain accounts are well thought out online and in other talks. But if I'm able to log into those and just grab them, that's one thing. If I get into somebody's workstation and they have them, the developer, things like that, it's not an exact science, but if I do run into something like that or am able to get one, it is a way to get onto iOS devices. It's really just a way to think, if you've got iOS devices in your organization and you do make custom applications for your organization, that the idea that there can't be malware on my devices because Apple says so is suddenly not true. It's all dependent on how secure your keys are. So if you keep them in a vault somewhere in an encrypted drive and that's it, by all means, yes, secure, but, well, pretty secure. But it all depends on where you keep them. So probably it's some guy who's in charge of the iOS development, and they're just on his computer somewhere.
Hey. First of all, nice presentation. Scary, very scary. I was scared.
Thank you.
First of all, with your permission, I'd like to talk a bit about two-factor authentication, and then I'm going to ask a question about certificates and certificate pinning. Regarding two-factor authentication, it's awesome, it's great, but it's also used as a method for getting access to somebody's account. So when you have two-factor authentication with the phone, let's say you get a text message or you get validation on your phone, it's also being used to reset passwords in accounts. So just as your phone is used for two-factor authentication for a second step, in a lot of cases, a lot of penetration testing and a lot of scenarios, real life scenarios happened where they used the victim's phone to reset their password. So a phone was significantly easier to hack than a workstation or a Gmail account or whatever. And with access to the phone, they were able to reset the password because of two-factor authentication. So that's one thing. What I'm curious about, in your experience working with enterprises and application manufacturers, how many of them use certificate pinning? Since we have like 200 or 300 root certificates on our devices, right? And a lot of them are from blah, 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 blah. Yeah. And we have absolutely no idea who's controlling those blah, blah, blah. And how many organizations that use certificate pinning to make sure that their devices aren't subject to, their applications aren't subject to man-in-the-middle attacks?
That's a very, very good question, and a very good point about the two-factor as well. That's true. If you have somebody's device, if you have the password plus, you get the two-factor. But about the certificate pinning, I see, sadly, a very small amount of people who are doing development doing certificate pinning. I mean, you get, the big players are thinking about it, but you're, simple, I made an application today. People are certainly not doing certificate pinning, but certificate pinning, for those who are not aware, basically stops you from adding another certificate to the store on your device and then, using that to then be able to, we as testers hate certificate pinning because it makes testing hard because we like to proxy things, but, I don't see nearly as many as I should. But all of the payment card apps that I've looked at use certificate pinning, so that helps, right? But there's a lot of stuff that doesn't, unfortunately. Wait, that was a very good question and a very good point as well. So any more? I can't see very well, so I probably won't see your hands. Well, if not, thank you guys very much, and I would love to hear from you, if you have thoughts about this, or you want to be a mobile security researcher before we all die out.